Hello and welcome to this Thursday edition of the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Carrie Hazley and today is April 23rd. There are multiple ways on the screen that you can get a hold of us. The first, the Alaska Weather Information Line. Give that number a call, 1-800-472-0391. That takes you to a menu system that you can access and then you can select the area that you want weather information for. You can also find us on the web at weather.gov/Alaska, and at any time you can email me. My address there on the screen is carrie.hazley@noaa.gov. Well, it is River Watch season and temperatures continue to warm and we're starting to see more and more open water across the state. Here to give us the latest on the River Watch forecast is hydrologist Crane Johnson.
And now, your 2020 Alaska River Watch update.
Good evening, this is Crane Johnson with the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, bringing you your April 23rd, 2020 Alaska Breakup Outlook. The three conditions we look at each spring for breakup are snowpack conditions, ice conditions, and then springtime temperatures throughout Alaska. If we look to my left, we see a snowpack map for Alaska and the Yukon Territories, and the shades of blue indicate above average to well above average snowpack conditions throughout Alaska and then upstream into the Yukon watershed, upstream from Eagle. Measured ice conditions in the months of March and April indicate throughout Alaska near normal ice conditions. One thing to highlight is that 2020 is different than the previous 6 winters when we look at ice and snow conditions. Generally from 2014 through 2019, we had warmer than normal winters with thinner than normal ice for this time of year. Based on the snowpack and ice conditions and springtime temperatures, we expect 2020 to trend more towards a dynamic breakup on our medium and large sized rivers, and we've already seen that on some of the breakups that have occurred this year. This is where the ice remains hard and in place. And these are the years when ice jams can form and release, and there's the potential for ice jam flooding. The previous 6 years were generally thermal breakups where the ice lost strength in place, and those are years typically without any significant ice jams. With the outlook for a dynamic breakup, this is the year to definitely prepare for the potential for ice jam flooding. If we look at recent temperatures in Fairbanks, we see that over the last 4 or 5 days, nighttime lows stayed above 32. This, combined with rain on snow, led to rapid snowmelt throughout interior Alaska, with minor flooding and erosion reported in Delta Junction, Fairbanks, Galena, and Tanana, as well as along the Steese, the Elliott, and the Taylor highways. If we look to the right of the dashed line, we see that we see a cooling trend in forecast temperatures over the next week, and then a trend towards normal temperatures towards the end of April and early May. A quick roundup of significant breakups in the last week. We had the Anchor River on the Kenai Peninsula breakup. Ice jams formed and released. We had Eagle River breakup with minor ice jams reported as well. And we had the Chena River begin to break up associated with that rain on snow and elevated temperatures at night. Minor ice jams formed and released, and there was minor flooding upstream from the Moose Creek Dam. We expect the Chena River breakup to continue with minor ice jams forming and releasing until that river's free and clear of ice. The 40 Mile broke up in dynamic fashion on April 21st. The Kuskokwim River and Nikolai broke up on the 21st, and then the Tozitna River west of Fairbanks broke up as well, and ice jams were reported on that river. The map on the right gives average breakup dates, and we can see that Nikolai broke up on April 21st in red, 1 day ahead of the average breakup date on April 22nd. Here's a photo of the 40 Mile River, just as an ice jam was forming and releasing, looking upstream from the Taylor Highway. It just shows an example of a dynamic breakup. That river is now free and clear with stranded ice on each bank. We still expect breakup timing to be slightly early throughout the state. These give average breakup dates with our outlook for timing. 0 to 3 days early in the upper Yukon and 3 to 5 days early in the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers. Statewide flood potential is generally above average for most watersheds, with the exception of North Slope rivers with average flooding due to ice jams and snowmelt. The Chena River still has a above average snowmelt flood potential. Once the river is free and clear from ice, we expect the river to continue to rise due to snowmelt over the next 1 to 2 weeks. If we look at our village flood potential map throughout the state of Alaska, we've got a low to moderate flood potential for most locations around Kuskokwim and Yukon rivers, with moderate to high flood potential at Circle in the upper Yukon. And that's because Circle, where it's situated, is more likely to flood on any given year. This is our current breakup map as of yesterday, April 22nd. We can see that the Yukon River is still fully ice covered from its mouth all the way up through the Canadian Reaches. We can see that the Kuskokwim River is still fully ice covered on the main stem all the way up past McGrath. Nikolai's got some open on the south fork of the Kuskokwim there. And then the other noteworthy items are the Tanana River between Fairbanks and Tanana Cross was reported as mostly open from a Civil Air Patrol flight. And the Chena River's got some open with those minor ice jams forming and releasing. The Nenana River at Nenana is reported open at the mouth with unknown conditions upstream. Further south, we see that some open on the Copper, and our North Slope rivers are still a few weeks away and all still fully ice covered. We'll leave you with a quick look at our most upstream webcam. This is Dawson City, just inside the Canadian border. We see April 15th, still wintertime conditions and significant changes in the past week. For the latest conditions, visit www.weather.gov/APRFC and submit observations and help us improve our breakup maps.
All right, thank you for that, Crane. Now, we do have one flood advisory currently in effect for the Fairbanks area, where we're seeing flooding along Chena Hot Springs Road. So the advisory is out for Chena Hot Springs Road at mile 26. And this one valid until tomorrow afternoon. We'll take a look as we go into the day tomorrow to decide what we need to do as far as the advisory then. Also, some ice jam flooding occurring on the rivers through downtown Fairbanks. Currently no water on the roadways, but certainly something that our hydrology team is taking a look at. No other watches, warnings, or advisories are currently in effect. Now, as far as the weather pattern goes, we do have a very active pattern out across the state of Alaska today with multiple areas of low pressure, bringing rain to parts of mainland Alaska, particularly the south central and southwestern parts of mainland Alaska, and also down over the Panhandle where we're seeing some scattered showers. Also, an area of low pressure pushing its way into the far western part of the Aleutians, an area of low pressure up along the Arctic coast, spreading some snow showers up there as well. As we go into the overnight hours, we'll continue to see these systems dominate the weather over most of the state, with low pressure down along the Alaska Peninsula, spreading showers all across the Bristol Bay area, and also showers across Kodiak Island, and showers into much of south central Alaska as we go through the overnight hours. Further north, we will see some snow mix in, particularly over the terrain, and then once you get into the Alaska Range area, more in the form of snow showers for any of the precip that we do see in that particular area. Along the Aleutians, that frontal boundary continues to push its way eastward, and so we'll see a mix of rain and snow out around Shimia, and then showers up along the Arctic there. Those snow showers, those should start to diminish as we go through the overnight hours. Precip over the Panhandle, over the higher terrain, we could see just some patchy areas of some snow mixing in. Now, for the day on Friday, we see that system out along the Aleutians move its way into the North Pacific. Another system pushes its way in, kind of a mixed bag of precip for the Aleutians and also parts of the Bering Sea, with freezing levels just kind of right along the Aleutian chain there. Into south central Alaska and also the rest of mainland Alaska, it's going to be a wet day on Friday, especially for the southern part of the state. All of the Alaska Peninsula and the Bristol Bay area, you're going to be seeing rain showers as we go through the day tomorrow. Most of the Kenai Peninsula is going to stay dry with some downslope conditions as the low kind of moves off into the Gulf. But the eastern Kenai Peninsula tomorrow should be pretty wet with showers. Also Kodiak Island wet tomorrow with showers. And then over the Panhandle, kind of a dying frontal boundary pushes its way in. So rain across a lot of the Panhandle, and then over some higher terrain, we will look for maybe some snow mixing in, but that's just going to be up at higher elevations. With high pressure up over the Arctic, we should see a good bit of clear skies across a good part of the interior, and everything dries out as far as precip goes for the day on Friday up over the Arctic. Now for Saturday, we do see kind of a mixed bag of precip again over the southeastern part of the state. Mostly rain, although again some higher terrain could see some snow mixing in as a new area of low pressure pushes its way into the Panhandle. Also some lingering low pressure and some scattered showers out along the Aleutians, primarily again in the form of rain, although some snow mixing in as you get a bit further north into the Bering, especially up around St. Paul Island. Now for the day on Saturday, should be a pretty nice day across a lot of the state. We see precip move out of south central Alaska, although it does stay around Kodiak Island and the Homer area, but mostly cloudy skies, maybe even giving way to some sunny breaks as we get into the day on Saturday. In that part of the state, into the interior though, mostly sunny skies. We shouldn't be looking for much in the way of clouds, and any weather up over the Arctic is going to be far enough north to not bring any precipitation into the coastal areas. Now let's take a look at temperatures as we start our day on Friday morning. Up along the Arctic coast, we're still seeing some temperatures that start with a negative. So Dehne, you'll start the day at -6 tomorrow. Over at AKwx, you're going to start your day at 2 degrees. Down around to the Seward Peninsula, temperatures in the teens, and then into the southwestern part of mainland Alaska, temperatures peaking out around 30 degrees as we get into the early start of our day. Along the Aleutians, temperatures again there in the upper 30s. In most places, south central will look for 40 to start the day at Homer, also 40 to start the day at Kodiak tomorrow, and then 40 seems to be the magic number down over much of the panhandle for the lows tomorrow morning as well. Now into the day on Friday, we do see a continuing trend towards warmer temperatures over a lot of the state. So King Salmon 54 for a high tomorrow, Dillingham 49, 45 over in Kodiak Island. Much of south central Alaska is going to be in the 40s as well. Glen Ellen, you're going to peak out at about 49 for a high tomorrow. On the other side of the Alaska range, we do see some 40s as well. Up over the Arctic, temperatures in the 20s to low teens. Saturday morning, still negative digits up on the Arctic coast, and then some 30s across south central and 40s down into the panhandle. Warming up nicely though as we go into the day on Saturday, with some 40s and 50s across much of the southern part of the state, teens up over the Arctic.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And let's take a look now at flying weather conditions across the state as we start out our Friday morning. We're looking for IFR conditions all along the Aleutian chain, also some IFR conditions over southwestern mainland Alaska, right along the coastal areas. IFR conditions across the Kodiak Island area, also up into Prince William Sound and across most of the Gulf tomorrow morning. IFR conditions to start the day along parts of the Alaska range as well. Down over the Panhandle, marginal VFR conditions, with also some marginal VFR conditions up over the Brooks Range and the Bristol Bay area. Conditions, though, improve as we go into the day on Friday. Marginal VFR conditions do linger along parts of the Alaska range and down into southwestern mainland Alaska around Bristol Bay, with Dillingham and King Salmon being in the marginal VFR. Also, we'll keep some marginal VFR conditions, at least at times, over the Panhandle. IFR, though, that's going to linger over Prince William Sound, over Kodiak, and over a lot of the Aleutians and the Bering. Into the day on Saturday, though, we do see some improvement in conditions, particularly across mainland Alaska, where we'll see primarily VFR conditions in the northern part of the state all the way down through the interior. Some marginal VFR conditions, though, Saturday morning around south central Alaska, also over into the Copper River Valley, and then we'll see lower conditions down over the Panhandle. IFR conditions as an area of low pressure moves in Saturday morning for the southern 2/3 of the Panhandle, marginal VFR in the northern third. Into the day on Saturday, great improvement though for much of mainland Alaska, where we should see widespread VFR conditions across most of the state. IFR conditions primarily offshore in the offshore waters. Also a little bit of IFR conditions lingering in just the southern part of the Panhandle, and also up along the coast around Point Lake, Cape Lisburne, all the way up to Wainwright. Out along the Aleutians, you'll stay IFR for Saturday. Now let's take a look at our pass conditions. Anatuvik Pass, you'll be primarily marginal VFR tomorrow, although we could see some spotty IFR at the south entrance. Same's going to be true for Adigan Pass for the day on Friday. For the Alaska Range passes, we're going to look for some marginal VFR to stick around through Lake Clark and Merrill Pass through the day on Friday. Same's going to be true for Rainy Pass, marginal VFR conditions. Windy Pass, though, should stay VFR for the majority of the day on Friday, and so will Isabel Pass, marginal VFR conditions just over in the far western part of the Alaska Range. So therefore, Isabel Pass, you should also be at VFR conditions as we go into the day on Friday. For Tenedo Pass, VFR conditions on Friday, and then Portage Pass, marginal VFR conditions. Down over the Panhandle, while we do see some marginal VFR conditions with stratus lingering in the channels, VFR conditions over most of the passes there, Chilkoot and White, should be primarily VFR through the day on Friday. For the freezing levels, we do see the surface line all the way up to the north side of the Alaska Range, which is good news for a lot of the melting and thawing, and also for just making it feel a bit like spring outside. As far as the freezing levels above that, they'll go, we've got the 2,000-foot line right across the northern part of the interior, dropping down to south central Alaska, southwestern mainland Alaska. We see that 6,000-foot line kind of connecting the Bethel area over to Anchorage and then down into the Panhandle. Down along the Aleutians, you've got a tongue of some warmer air, 8,000 foot for the freezing level there. For our icing on Friday, we do see some potential for some isolated moderate along the Aleutians, and then also up into southwestern mainland Alaska, wrapping its way into the Gulf Coast. Also some isolated moderate ice down over the Panhandle tomorrow and into parts of the Alaska Range. For turbulence, we are going to look for widespread considerable moderate turbulence across much of mainland Alaska tomorrow. Some spotty isolated severe turbulence over the Brooks Range and then on the Seward Peninsula where we've got some wind in the terrain. Also some occasional moderate down over the Aleutians and the Panhandle. As far as upper level winds go, we do have 2 jet streams on the map today, one pushing its way into the northern part of the state at about 70 knots, another jet down over the North Pacific where winds there peak out at about 150 knots. Down to 9,000 feet, the strongest winds are going to be out along the Aleutians tomorrow between 15 and 30 knots, and then up over much of mainland Alaska we see some fairly weak winds, although 30 knots up around Fairbanks and the Big Delta area, also 15 to 20 knots across south central Alaska, and then down to 3,000 feet. The strongest winds again out along the Aleutians, peaking out at about 35 knots, and a jet across south central Alaska. That one peaks out at about 40 knots there at 3,000 feet tomorrow.
Hey there again, stargazing friends. Trace here. Meteor showers are my favorite. And while this April shower won't bring May flowers, it might bring fireballs. This week is the annual Lyrid meteor shower, one of the oldest recorded meteor showers. They're caused by debris from the comet Thatcher, which won't show up again until 2276. So meteors will peak around midweek at 18 meteors per hour, or one every few minutes. Find a dark spot away from city lights, bring a chair and a warm drink and a blanket, and look northeast. You'll see Vega and hopefully some really great fireballs. Humans have been watching meteors rain down through our spaceship Earth since forever, but this shower was one of the first recorded 2,500 years ago in ancient China. Keep looking up.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Cindy Preller. She is the Tsunami Program Manager for the National Weather Service in Alaska region. Thanks for joining us again, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
We're talking about tsunami awareness and safety here in Alaska especially, and one of the things that has been one of your main focuses is the Tsunami Ready program. What is that, and how do Alaskans find out more?
Awesome. Yes, Tsunami Ready is a National Weather Service hosted program in partnership with Storm Ready.
Okay.
And it is a program that we conduct with our partners in the state, but it's mostly community driven. So if a community wants to become Tsunami Ready, well, the first thing they need to do is get a hold of me or their local WCM at a weather forecast office or their tsunami team at the state level.
So, and this is something that's a NOAA grant, so there's money available to help encourage the preparedness at the local level there in the city or the village.
Yeah.
What are some of the places that have done this already?
Oh, our oldest Tsunami Ready city is Seward,
Good.
you know, but also Sitka, Homer, Valdez are the, you know, the main players, but we've got several Tsunami Ready communities that I'm very proud of. It takes several years to accomplish this. And so a few of the things that they do is the tsunami risk will be assessed by someone like me or another scientist will help find out, you know, really what their probability is. We'll create an inundation map, an evacuation map. They'll have a mitigation plan. We will set up some partnerships with the schools, make an evacuation shelter, and then they need to practice. But it is the city that owns the program, really. It's up to them. And many cities would like to have sirens, and so we help them get those. And, you know, and they practice. They have to practice.
Sure. So let's say I'm driving into a place like Seward that's tsunami ready. What are some of the things I should look for as maybe a visitor so I know maybe where I need to go or can be more aware of my tsunami risk?
Absolutely. The Tsunami Ready signage is really blatant. It's this, you know, blue and white curling wave sign, and And there's different shapes of signs that'll show you if you are in the hazard zone or where the evacuation routes are and when you're out of shelter.
Okay. So this is a multi-step process that helps the residents be more aware of their own risk, but then also prepare for when that risk arrives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, many communities sound their sirens daily. Some sound them weekly, you know, to make sure everybody knows what they mean. And there's often drills. We have an annual drill once a year. We have Tsunami Awareness Preparedness Week, and that's a good time for each community to do some exercising.
Okay. And is this a program that is unique to Alaska?
Absolutely not. It's national.
Okay.
And all over the country, you'll have the same signage, so it's consistent.
Good. So if I'm taking the kids to California, I should be able to see something familiar.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And you know, some communities hesitate because they think it'll discourage tourism. And so I would like to tell those communities that what they're actually doing is they're encouraging responsibility.
Sure.
The tsunami's going to happen.
Right.
And it's going to hit every coastline. So, you know, it's not about when, it'll be any time. So the fact that they're showing tourists that they are making steps to be prepared for this, I think would encourage people to want to stay there.
Right, and that would be no different than, say, you or I visiting the Midwest, where we know there's going to be really bad thunderstorms and maybe there's a risk for tornadoes. We're aware of that risk when we go there.
Absolutely. If I see a sign for a tornado shelter, I'm going to remember that.
Right, okay, all right. So we're just doing a better job of being more prepared with something that's bound to happen again.
I hope so.
Okay, very good. Where can people go again to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program here in Alaska?
Well, one, there is a Tsunami Ready website. So, you know, just Tsunami Ready,
Google
and that'll
Tsunami
get you
Ready.
there.
Okay.
And then probably the best person for people to contact is their warning coordination meteorologist at their local weather forecast office, which is Anchorage or Juneau, most likely.
Okay, all right. So most of the folks along the Bering Sea coast, again, are not at a huge risk for tsunamis at this
No,
point.
they don't need to worry about it.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. But always learning to be prepared no matter where you are in Alaska, no matter what the risk, always a good step. And tsunami is a major player in that, as we well know from events like 1964.
Alaskans are resilient. I really believe in them.
Very good, very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us again, and please make an effort to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program in your village and town if you haven't already. We'll be back with Cindy again next time to talk more about the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We actually have a group of geologists working for the National Weather Service, so scratch your head on that one and we'll join you next time. I'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Packs.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back now. Let's take a look at marine weather conditions across the state of Alaska. We start by taking a look at the sea ice edge out over the Bering Sea. We have seen some gradual melting of the ice edge itself and also seeing a lot of the ice pulling back away from some of the coasts. So we've got some open water in some places there where we haven't seen it in quite some time. That said, we are under a pattern though with a northeasterly wind out along most of the ice edge. That's helping to push the ice edge back to the southwest. So we're actually seeing the ice move south a bit, and between now and Monday we're going to look for about a southward movement or southwestward movement of 20 to 25 nautical miles for that sea ice edge. As far as other marine conditions go across the state, we start by taking a look down over the Panhandle. In the interior waters for the day on Friday, winds primarily out of the south to southeast, between 10 and 20 knots, and then seas between 2 and 4 feet. Out along the outer coast, winds a bit stronger, 25 knots, and again winds out of the southeast, with seas ranging to 7 and 8 feet. Into the day on Saturday, some of those seas start to pick up, 8 to 11 feet for the range, but we do see a lot of dropping off in the wind there in the Gulf, and then winds out over the interior channels for the most part out of the south to southeast, although once you get a bit further north we see a bit of a directional shift. Between Skagway and Juneau, those winds out of the north for the day on Saturday. Into the day on Friday now, let's take a look at Cook Inlet first. We see winds out of the north between 10 and 15 knots for much of the inlet, although outside of Kashamak Bay, when you get into the southern part of the inlet out in that open water, we're going to see winds there out of the northeast on Friday, 25 knots with seas up to 5 feet, and then through much of the northern Gulf, winds up to about 25 knots and up to 7 feet for the seas out there. Into the day on Saturday, a bit of improvement for some of the winds in most places. We see the winds in the Gulf drop back to about 15 to 20 knots on Saturday. And then for much of the inlet there, we see some improvement as well. Southern part of Cook Inlet on Saturday, they're around Augustine Volcano, 20 knots out of the north with seas at about 4 feet. Over towards Kodiak Island and then along the Alaska Peninsula there, variable wind direction. Kodiak Island, you're seeing most of your winds come out of the east or northeast, although actually south side of the island coming out of the southeast, so everybody's kind of converging in one place there. Winds between 15 to 20 knots for the day on Friday. Towards Bristol Bay, winds out of the northeast with seas up to 3 feet. And then as we go into the day on Saturday, some dropping off of our winds, Bristol Bay down to 20 with your seas at 2 feet, and then a bit more of a shift around Kodiak Island where everything's going to be primarily coming out of the northeast by the time we get into the day on Saturday, winds to 20 knots, seas ranging between 5 and 7 feet. For the day on Friday, out along the Aleutians, the strongest winds and waves are going to be in the far western part of the Aleutians as a frontal boundary pushes its way in that particular area. Seas up to 12 feet in the area between Kiska and Shemya. Winds out of the east by about 30 knots, and then as you get further to the east along the chain, winds and seas drop off for the day on Friday. The frontal boundary will actually move its way for the day on Saturday. It'll be a bit further to the east there around Nikolsky, but it also starts to weaken, so the good news there is we won't see the seas and the winds be quite as strong. So on the Pacific side, we'll see winds primarily out of the northwest between 10 and 20 knots. Winds out of the northwest on the Bering side as well, although just a bit weaker in most places. For Friday, up along the west coast now, let's take a look at those northeasterly winds that are helping to move that sea ice edge. Those are going to persist on Friday, 20 to 25 knots, and then along the ice edge in open waters, seas between 2 and 4 feet. Winds drop off a little bit for the day on Saturday, but stay out of the northeast, which will keep pushing that sea ice edge back to the south and west. 15 knots for the speed as we get into the day on Saturday over much of the ice along the west coast. Into the day on Friday now, let's take a look up along the Arctic where we have all sea ice, so we don't have to talk about waves, but we do see a good bit of winds, pretty much 10 to 15 for most places as far as the speeds go. Variable in direction, but generally out of the east to northeast. And then as we go into the day on Saturday, wind shift to be out of the south along the Arctic coast, 10 to 15 knots. And then over on the west coast, we see them out of the southwest, also about 10 to 15 knots. Have a good evening.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.